Intelligent talk that's sure to raise the IQ.
Here's Guy Wehman, Ben Brunson, and Frank Vernuccio inside the news.
Welcome back to the program, Inside the News. Guy Wehman, Frank Vernuccio, and Ben Brunson. Okay, internationally is what we're going to be talking about right now. And Ben, let's talk about this Ukraine drone strike. Now, Russia's been hit a couple of times, and it looks like Ukraine did it. And how Vladimir Putin accepts this or not, we'll find out. Ben?
Well, I don't know that Vladimir Putin has much of a choice on the matter, but Zelensky has made it clear that part of the strategy of the Ukrainian military right now is to reach out and touch Russia inside their homeland, excuse me, including hitting Moscow with long-range drones. These are drones. The Ukrainians have been busy building a domestic drone manufacturing capability, and some of that is included taking drones that they either build or buy and modifying them to make it all the way to Moscow. And now they're hitting some buildings. There's no real damage being done other than psychological. It's kind of like the early bombing raids of World War II, mostly a psychological impact, or the Doolittle raid over Japan. Not much damage, but psychological impact. So how the Russians react to it, I don't know. It's kind of it could backfire on the Ukrainians because it may help mobilize Russian popular opinion in favor of Putin and to help him kind of dig his heels in terms of having support for a long-term war. So I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. They need to be focused on defeating the Russian military on the field, which they're doing a reasonably good job of right now. So they're advancing in their counteroffensive to the south. They have brought pretty much all of Crimea under threat of fire with longer range weapons like the Storm Shadow cruise missile. The British have supplied them, and they are grinding down the Russian army slowly but surely. So I think, if I were Zelensky, I'd probably keep more of my focus that way. But it's an attempt to try to undermine Putin's support.
Okay, Frank, yes. Ben brought up the Crimea, and that bridge has been blown up. And it seems like all the action has been down in Ukraine or the Donbass region or that bridge. And then finally, Zelensky says, well, guess what? You're going to mess up our country and obliterate all of our buildings and all. Well, we're going to take a chunk out of some of your buildings as well, Frank.
There's a growing theme in today's show, which is the similarity between progressive domestic views and progressive or Democrat views on foreign affairs. In cities across the country, if you're getting mugged and you are lucky enough to have a weapon on you and you shoot your mugger or you stab your mugger, you're going to get in as much trouble as the guy who tried to hurt you. Now, in Ukraine, the Russians have invaded Ukraine. They started a war. Where is it written that the guy who starts the war, the country that starts the war, has to be immune from any kind of counterattack on their territory? The Ukrainians have an absolute moral right to do whatever they want in response to that Russian attack, including attacking Moscow itself. Now, to Ben's point, he's absolutely right. I think it was a real consideration whether that's a good strategic point, because it could unify the Russian population on a war that's increasingly unpopular. So from that political perspective, perhaps it doesn't make sense for the Ukrainians to attack. But in terms of whether they have the right, if there is such a thing in international conflict, to attack the Russian homeland in response to the assault that they are enduring, they have an absolute right to do so. I understand there was an offshoot of this. Elon Musk decided not to allow the use of some of his surveillance satellites to facilitate the attack on Moscow. But in terms of the right that Ukraine has, I think they have every right to do this. So the Russians, I think, seem to perceive that they have the right to assault another country without taking any assaults back on their own homeland. That's a ludicrous concept, and I think the Ukrainians are making a pretty valid point. Whether a better use of their missiles would be to attack Russian forces within Ukraine, that's a strategic consideration that certainly is open to discussion. But they have the absolute moral right to attack whatever part of Russia they choose to do so.
Okay, let's take a plane on our geography map, go over the Black Sea, and keep on going south. And we're going to come upon Syria. We have not talked much about Syria lately, Ben.
Yeah, what's happening in Syria right now involving Russian forces. Excuse me a second. I'm losing my voice, sorry. What's happening in Syria right now involving Russian forces is very scary because Russian fighter jets are attacking US drones operating over Syria, US Predator drones specifically. And they're attacking them not with kinetic weapons, conventional weapons like air-to-air missiles, but with unconventional means such as dropping flares in front of these Predator drones as they fly around and doing other maneuvers which are very unsafe. These are acts of war. To be very clear about it, these are acts of war. There's over half a dozen documented cases now of Russian fighter jets harassing U.S. Predator drones or attempting to bring them down, if you will, over Syrian airspace. We rely on those drones to protect our forces on the ground in Syria and to reach out and hit targets that we identify, ISIS commanders and other Muslim radicals operating on the ground in Syria. So this is a test of the will and the strength of Washington, and how we react will be important. Under Donald Trump, the Wagner Group challenged U.S. forces at Entente, and they paid a dear price because the reaction was a full-on strike from U.S. artillery and Apache gunships, which killed hundreds of Wagner troops. They never tried fooling around with U.S. troops again after that in any way, shape, or form until Biden took office. So this is a test. And right now, I don't know what reaction is coming out of the Biden White House. It's very dangerous when Russian military jets are engaged in acts of war against U.S. military aircraft. So this is a very dangerous period, but perceived weakness on the part of Joe Biden is what is prompting the Russians to push the envelope in Syria.
All right, we're going to take a lot more look at this in our Picking Up the Pieces segment coming up in segment number 4. This is Inside the News with Frank Vernuccio with USAGovPolicy.com, the American Analysis of News and Media, and Ben Brunson, the author of The Falstaff Enigma and Esther Sling. You can find Ben at benbrunson.com and amazon.com. Coming up, the true danger of impeachment with Joe Biden. There are some danger signs that the Republicans will have to be looking out for because everything could just plain explode. We're going to be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.